Are we live? I do believe so. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you. It is Friday, finally, the end of the week. And for many of you, I'm sure that you are counting the hours or the minutes rather until you can finally go home. If in Cape Town, you're probably going home in about 2 or 3 hours, if at least me waiting for an electrician or a plumber is anything to go by, because for some reason on a Friday after 3 o'clock, there are no electricians and plumbers anywhere to be found in the entire province of the Western Cape. But nevertheless, I know that my brothers and sisters in the north usually work until 5 on a Friday, and so to all of you in the north, there's still a few hours to go, but it is weekend, and as such, I do believe that everyone is in good spirits. Vern, how you doing? Siege Gardens, how you doing? Gordon, how you doing, sir? James, how you doing? Echo, how you doing? Peter Pan, how you doing? TFC, how are you? Call me Amy, how are you? Ladies and gentlemen, I am super happy to be back here with you. We have a number of stories that we have to cover today. Some really interesting things happening in the country, but also in the world. There is one nation in this world that genuinely South Africa could be learning from, and yet this seems to be one of the nations that South Africa has no interest in learning from whatsoever, and that would be Argentina. Hey guys, I'm in a car. My husband is driving, and we're listening to you. Call me Amy and husband. Thank you very much for joining. Please do not get into an accident, especially when you see some of the stories that we have planned today. So, luckily you are both sitting down, but pay attention to the road at the very least. Justin, how you doing, sir? Malice, how are you? All right, so we're going to jump in, I think, directly into our first story because it is, I mean, it's a doozy. And it's something that I have to say, over the last few weeks, I've become a huge fan of reading the Common Sense every single morning. They have this newsletter that they send out every single morning with just like a bunch of the most important stuff happening in the country, and so it, alongside News 24 and Daily Maverick, has become daily reads for me. Not because I think News 24 or Daily Maverick is good, but it's always nice to get a sort of holistic view of what is happening in the country so that I can decide what needs to be covered, what is important, and oftentimes it's just stories that's good to have in your back pocket in case of emergency, I guess. I am always in a car listening. You go with me to 5 to 6 customers every live. Sir Lagalot, thank you very much. I truly appreciate you guys. Desiree, how you doing? You're in the USA. We work all weekend as well, but off on Monday and Tuesday. Wow. No, in South Africa, it's pretty, I would say, it, most people who work normal jobs tend to have weekends off. With here and there, you'll have weekends where you have to be on standby, but South Africa is pretty big on weekends. Um, the only people who don't are people who work in the retail sector. So if you're working for like one of the, yeah, if you're working for any shop that serves customers, you're going to be working weekends, most likely most weekends of the month. But if you're working in an office, if you're working in any sort of job, like even in plumbing, we used to have one plumber every single weekend on standby, because most of the any new installations or any big jobs that we do will only be done Mondays to Fridays, nowhere else. So, yeah, I would say most people in South Africa have weekends off. But then again, I haven't been in the real world for over a decade. I've been doing YouTube for the last decade, and so things may have changed. But I mean, I look at my family members, I look at the people who work. Yeah, it's most of the time the people who work on weekends tend to do it because they want to. 0 days without nonsense. I don't even know why I check the board anymore. Siege Gardens in South Africa, there is no board. We have stolen that board and sold it to someone in the service of corruption long ago. Let's not even care. Ivan, unrelated. Did you see Discord Tokology? I have. Yes, you sent me a message. I don't know if you replied yet, but I did reply uh to your message last night. So I don't know if you've seen that. I work 6 days a week. What do you do, Amy? How do you keep the criminal corrupt Pala Pala in power? Vote for the criminal corrupt DA. They will sell your vote to Pala Pala for nice fat ministers' posts and their own blue light convoys. So Macedonia, yes and no. So let's just quickly, and as you guys know, during live streams, I won't read you the article because I have already read it. If you don't trust me, you're free to go to the Common Saints and you can go look at what they wrote. I will just convey to you what is actually happening here because otherwise it's boring. It is boring to watch someone read an article. So I make sure to read these articles before we go live so that I actually know what they're all about. But effectively, what this boils down to is the IEC just published their election donation fact sheet. This is where they look at every single party, who donated and funded these different political parties, and where does the money actually come from. Some very interesting stuff that emerges from this is the incredible narrow base of funders that effectively fund the entirety of the South African landscape. So you look at the DA, for example, and the DA gets almost all of its funding from like 4 or 5 super large companies, like genuinely massive companies. Okay, so the DA is the country's biggest party by money. So if you just look at this, the DA got 57.3 million rand in donations. In contrast, the ANC declared only 10 million. But here's where things get even more tricky and absolutely bonkers. The EFF and the MK disclosed no money. So according to the IEC, both the EFF and the MK received 0 checks, 0 donations, 0 anything. Anyone with eyes know that this is just not true. There's no way that the EFF and the MK can do what they do without some kind of funding mechanism, which means that funding comes from one place: corrupt dealings. It's either a bunch of tenders that allow for the EFF and the MK to just get money flowing into their pockets, or it's just, they're not telling anyone where that money comes from, which I would argue should be an investigation by the IEC. If you have political parties, the 2 of the largest political parties in South Africa, just not saying where they got their money or that they got any money in the first place, that would immediately lead to an investigation. Now, to the IEC's credit, they have started investigating Rise Mzansi. So we'll quickly just talk about Rise Mzansi. Rise Mzansi is a sub 1% party. They're a very tiny party in South Africa. The DA was able to snatch 57 million rand in donations. Rise Mzansi snatched 30 million rand in donations. No, I say donations, that's me misspeaking, because the donations since came from one source, an organization called We the People. The organization has a Facebook page. The Facebook page hasn't been updated since last year, June. There's no other information on who is part of the organization, who leads the organization, where does that organization get its money. Like, none of that exists. It's just 30 million, and here you go. Now, what's interesting about this and why the IEC is investigating it is the timing. For those of you that haven't been paying attention, the impeachment committee is now chaired by one of Rise Mzansi's members of parliament. Both the DA and the ANC suggested him as the chairman for the impeachment committee, and then magically, out of nowhere, arrives this 30 million rand donation. The party itself says, well, there's nothing strange going on here. We originally borrowed 30 million rand. Now, I need to stress this. If you're a sub 1% party in the country, who the hell is lending you 30 million rand? Hey, guys, just think about this. The DA, as the second largest party in the country, manages to snatch 57.3 million rand. So someone decided that Rise Mzansi is worth 30 million rand, like they're good for it. They can repay that money. But of course, they didn't think that, because the only reason Rise Mzansi had to declare the money they say, at least according to their leader, is because the loan was written off. So the person that gave them the loan said, nah, don't worry about it. It's fine. And then it became a donation, and now they had to declare it. We the People, this shady organization that no one has ever heard of, that has one Facebook page. By the way, anyone can make a Facebook page. I know, because I don't even go on Facebook. And every single week I have multiple invites from random pages on Facebook. So anyone can make a Facebook page. But nothing else is behind this page, which is super, super interesting. But okay, going back to the DA who actually declared their funding, you have the DA's 57.3 million rand. 75% of that comes from 4 large donations. So what are those donations? The IEC report, and this is now quoting from the Common Sense, lists 2 other major individual donations from Mr. G. Ryan, who gave 4 million. Here it is. It's okay. So the 4 donors is this: Fynbos Capital, Fynbos Equitate, Main Street 1564, and Mary Slack. Those are the 4 big donors. All 4 of these big donors are controlled by some rather powerful I'll read this for you. I didn't want to read it, but I have to. Okay, so the DA's biggest declared donor was Fynbos Capital, which gave 13 million rand. Fynbos Equitate gave another 10 million rand. Together, the 2 Fynbos entities gave the DA 23 million rand, equal to 40.1% of the party's declared funding for the quarter. Those entities have been linked to Michiel Leroux, one of the founders of Capitec and among the most successful businessmen produced by South Africa's post-apartheid banking sector. It's one of 2, by the way, that is in the top 100 of the JSE. Okay, so the Fynbos donation therefore indicate that DA continues to draw support from the upper end of South Africa's financial and entrepreneurial class. A further 10 million rand, equal to 17.4% of the DA's declared funding, came from Main Street 1564, a private South African company, Company Search Records, linked to Anthony Charles Bole, a prominent private equity and investment figure associated with Bright, Value Capital Partners, Reclamation Holdings, Real Foods, and other investment vehicles. Bole also, and then Mary Slack is the interesting one here, a member of the Oppenheimer family, also gave 10 million rand, another 17.4% of the DA's quarterly funding. Now, let's just park on the DA for a second. There is something incredibly strange when 6 people, so it's the 4 major donors, about 75% of their 57 million comes from 4 people, and then 2 other people make up the rest. There is something incredibly alarming when you have 6 funders basically funding an entire political party. And I'll tell you guys why this is alarming, why you should worry about this. Political parties don't exist in the way that people think. So people think of political parties and they think, oh, this political party represents my interests. That's not how it works. The political party, their job is to figure out, how do I convince the voters that my donors' interests is in their interest? That's what drives a political party. Because as important as you think you may be as the voter, you're not the one paying the salaries. Jordan Hill Lewis is not paid by you. Jordan Hill Lewis is paid by the Oppenheimer family. He's paid by Fynbos Equitate and Fynbos Capital. Those are the people paying his salary. Those are the people who pay his chiefs of staff and all of the staff members that work for the DA. They're the ones that allow the DA to exist as the largest financial party in South Africa. And so you don't matter. It is the investors that matter, which to me is a significant problem. So if you go and you look at, for example, Action SA got about 10 million in donations. The largest share of that came from a man in Australia. Can't remember his name. Doesn't really matter. But he's some gaming guy who is South African but moved to Australia. And then Herman Mashaba gave a bunch of money. And then Herman Mashaba, through a company that his wife owns and operates, gave a bunch of money to Action SA, which together makes up around 10 million. Right. So one might argue that the Action SA is the only truly voter funded party in the country, because both Herman Mashaba and his wife and that gaming entrepreneur at least vote. But nevertheless, and this is just another way in which parties can hide their money, because it could be that, Herman Mashaba donates that money. But how did Herman Mashaba get the money to donate? Did he use only his own money, or were a bunch of via donations made to his investment firm, because that's the one that his wife operates, and then that money was donated? So this is another way to sort of play hide the footsie with all of this. So all of this is already super problematic, because what bothers me, South Africa is one of the few countries that I'm aware of that has the major political parties in our country not funded by voters at all. I mean, you look at Donald Trump and his campaign. Donald Trump in America got the largest sum of his campaign contributions from voters. The voters of the Republican Party that wanted to see Donald Trump succeed gave their own money to make him succeed. Bernie Sanders, even in America, had a 100% voter-funded campaign. He took no money from big institutional investors. All throughout the world, you see parties at least rely on some donations from their own voters, except in South Africa, where our largest parties, the ANC gets 10 million rand, they declare none of it. So we don't know where that 10 million comes from, FYI. If you go to the ANC's, to the IEC's breakdown of party funding, all the ANC says is 10 million rand. Who gave it? No one cares. No one knows. The EFF, the MK didn't even declare it, which technically is against the law. It's against funding law in this country, and yet they seem to never get in trouble for this, because it's not the first time that the EFF have done this. The EFF has multiple times refused to reveal where they get the money that they get, and they do it because they say the money they get doesn't meet the minimum threshold. Now, I didn't look this up before we started the stream, but I think the minimum threshold in South Africa is something like 100,000 rand. So if someone donates less than 100,000 rand, you don't have to declare that. It's only donations over a certain amount. And so the EFF just claims this money is below the threshold, so we don't have to disclose it. Of course, that would be entirely, that would be insane, that the EFF would have the support to have so many millions of people giving them less than 100,000 rand in donations when they're a sub 10% party in this country. And then for the for the MK, it's even more up in the air. Literally, no one knows where their money comes from. So why is this such a big problem? Why does this bother me? Well, the Rise Mzansi one is, I think, obvious. And I think all of you would agree. It's pretty strange that the new chairman of the impeachment committee receives, his party at least, receives a 30 million rand donation as soon as he becomes the chairperson of the impeachment committee, and where the money comes from is question mark. No one knows where that money actually comes from. That is strange. I'm not saying that it's illegal. I'm just saying, in a country like South Africa, I would not be surprised if that is illegal. If, the chairperson received a donation that made it very clear we like Ramaphosa, and we would prefer if Ramaphosa isn't kicked as the president of the country. So why does the rest bother me? It proves once again that South Africans have no control over our political establishment. We have no control over what our politicians do or how our politicians act. When you look at the DA, for example, for all of its bluster and all of its talk, remember the DA, when they were in opposition, they were fiercely critical of the ANC and the way in which the ANC governs. they were fiercely critical of the ANC not supporting the free market and not caring about the free market. The DA has always been the party that espouses themselves to be capitalist. They have always been the party that espouses themselves to care deeply about freedom and the freedom of citizens not to be surveilled and controlled by the state. And yet, you see a different side of the DA now that they are in office. I'm just trying to look for that post. Here we go. Here you have Dr. Leon Schreiber. I will remind all of you that he is a member of the DA. He is a minister currently for South Africa as part of the GNU from the DA. And here you have Dr. Leon Schreiber defending the implementation of digital IDs in South Africa, saying that actually this is actually designed to empower South Africans, not to surveil them. But of course, this goes right against everything that the DA claims to be standing for. The DA claims that they care about the freedom of people. The DA claims that they care about the free market. The DA claims that they don't like the overburdened nature of the ANC. And yet here you have the DA suggesting a system and forcing this system into implementation that would absolutely eradicate the freedom of all South Africans overnight. And for those of you that have doubts on that, for those of you that think, no, it won't, the second you have digital IDs, especially in how the government is trying to implement them, the government has already said they will have an app that you will have to install. And on that app, your driver's license as well as your ID will be on that app. So whenever you want to do anything, you need that app. You need to show that app. You need to scan that app so that people can know who you are. That immediately gives the government the ability to declare you persona non grata in an instant. If you do something that the government doesn't like, nowadays, right, as things work at the moment, if the government wants to declare you persona non grata, they would first have to open a court case against you. They would then have to find you guilty of whatever asinine thing that they've suggested you did. Then they would have to go through an incredible amount of legalese in order to take away your ID or take away your passport, if that is even possible. I don't even think the law in South Africa gives this the state the right to remove someone's citizenship who was born here and who has no other citizenship. But if they wanted to, I assume it would be a very lengthy process for them to actually be able to do it. But now they can, and they don't have to. They don't have to officially declare you persona non grata. They just block your app. So all they're saying is, hey, you're still a citizen. You can just not do anything. And then how long does it take before the state goes, well, now that everyone has the app, we're also going to remove things like Google Pay and Apple Pay and all the rest of these. You're going to have to pay through the government app. So everyone has to register their bank accounts with the app. And if you think, Stefan, that will never happen, where China, the system that Leon Schreiber and the DA and the ANC is trying to implement in South Africa is the exact system that exists in China. In China, your bank account, your bus fare, your public transport, your ID, your passport, everything is on a government-controlled app. If you do or say anything that the government doesn't like, if you post something on X or on any of the platforms that the government deems to be irregular, they can just block you. And suddenly you find you can't get on any of the buses because your app will just say denied. So you can't get on the bus. You can't get on the trains because the app says you're not allowed to travel. You can't get money from your bank because the app says you're not allowed to get money from your bank. You can't go into the police because the app says you're not a citizen. So what do? The government can basically tell you what you can and cannot do, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't care if government says, oh, we're not trying to surveil you, we're trying to empower you. It's not about what the government's intentions is now. It's about the possibilities that a system opens up. Because maybe Dr. Leon Schreiber genuinely has no interest in cutting off South Africans, right? He genuinely doesn't want to surveil you or, stop you from getting on the bus. But the fact of the matter is that the service opens it up. The service makes it possible. Ismay, what is Digital ID? An app? So Digital ID will effectively be the replacement of the smart IDs that we have now. The card that you get, your passport, your everything, your driver's license, all of it will now be digital. So effectively, their argument, the government's argument is, this will allow you to apply for all of these things online. Right. So instead of me having to go in and actually get all of the documents signed and everything, and now I get my ID and it takes weeks and months and whatnot, instead of me having every 5 years to go and renew my driver's license, I can just do it online. But to that, my argument would be, well, why don't you just remove the mandatory limits on it? Wouldn't that also solve the problem? Because the problem, according to them, is it's just too burdensome. They don't have enough staff to deal with all of the people that constantly have to renew their licenses and constantly have to get IDs. So it would just be much simpler and easier. Well, then that is simple. Just remove the mandatory expiration dates. You're the ones who decided when it expires. You can decide that it doesn't expire at all. And you can even use the private industry in this regard and just go, look, if something changes, so you go to an optometrist and you get glasses that you didn't have before, that optometrist has to now inform the state that you received glasses that might change your license. So, for example, I have glasses. Every single time I have to go renew my driver's license, I have to go to the optometrist to get a form to tell them what the hell is wrong with my eyes so that they can put that on their records so that they know that without my glasses, I can see, but I get headaches. So I don't have to have a special license, but nevertheless, I'm allowed to drive without my glasses. But yeah, I get a headache if I do. But I have to do this, right? I don't have to. I can do it with them, but it takes too long. So I just go to an optometrist and get it done so that I don't have to wait in line for their stupid eye tests that effectively means nothing. But effectively, you can just remove these things. So why is the DA doing this? Well, it's because the DA doesn't work for you and me. When the DA tells you that they're for the free market, that's just so that you think they're a different party to the ANC. That's just so that you think they're not part of the ANC. It's not because they're not the same as the ANC. They're exactly the same as the ANC. Think about Bala Bala, the Bala Bill, right? What happened with the Bala Bill? Before the Bala Bill is implemented, before the DA is part of the GNU, the DA criticizes the Bala Bill to hell and back. It is a DA minister that cleared the Bala Bill and implemented it into South African law. It's a DA minister that did that. Not an ANC one. A DA minister said, yep, we like Bala Bala, or we like the Bala Bill. Let's do it. Bala Bala. I keep thinking about a town in Limpopo. We like it. Let's do it. Think about expropriation without compensation. The DA's official stance on expropriation without compensation is that it is unconstitutional and illegal and the government can't do it. Except Dean McPherson openly said they will expropriate without compensation. And more importantly, Dean McPherson, DA minister, said that compensation can be null and that null is not zero. That's the DA. So the DA's position officially is in opposition to the ANC. Unofficially, once in government, the DA just does what the ANC does in the exact same manner, in the exact same way. There's literally zero difference. Why is that? Is the big question. Why does the DA and the ANC have the exact same policies? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad you asked. Well, you didn't ask, but I asked on your behalf, and I'm assuming you're here because you want to know. Um, the policies that drive South Africa are not the policies of the ANC or of the DA or of the people. The policies that drive South Africa are the policies of very large investors. Very large investors. And these are people who have been around for a super long time. So again, you go, for example, on the Common Sense, and you find the Common Sense releases this research that was done by the Social Foundation, the Social Research Foundation, as well as polling done by the Common Sense that looks at what South Africans want. And you will find that most South Africans don't want BEE. In fact, 70%, and again, you can go read this article, it's on the Common Sense. 70% of South Africans say BEE has not worked. And 70% of South Africans say that while empowerment might be important, the way it's being done now is solving no issues. 70% of South Africans say that empowerment should not be done on race, but based on material means. That's what 70% of South Africans say. The economy of South Africa says that BEE is destroying us. You've all seen the reports because I've covered this in videos and in live streams. BEE costs South Africa billions of rands every single year in lost economic growth. Every single year. So BEE is destroying this country. The people of South Africa don't want BEE in its current formation. So who benefits from BEE? Well, this brings us to the second story, or the third or the fourth. How many stories are we in now? I've lost track. This is another story. One South African company spent 300% of its profits to comply with BEE. Now, this is research that was done by two companies, Cadera Analytics and XA Global Trade Advisors, that decided to poll around 100 companies in South Africa to find out how much does BEE compliance cost them every single year. And it ranges from around 10 million if you want to have sort of level 5 all the way up to, I think, level 4 in terms of BEE. But if you want level 1 BEE status, it'll cost you over 100 million rand every single year in compliance fees. Or is this company, and they don't reveal the name of the company, but one of the companies that they surveilled or polled revealed to them that they have spent 307% of their profits to comply with Black economic empowerment in a single year, with the firm achieving level 2 status. Level 2. Of the 100 companies that they spoke to, around 20 of them don't comply with BEE or are at the very minimum level 8 BEE compliant, because they have found out and they have learned that there is zero economic upside to complying with BEE. BEE just costs them a bunch of money. And the problem for most of these companies is that they don't get the state contracts that really make it worth their while. The state doesn't pay on time. The state oftentimes doesn't have enough contracts in general to go around. And so for a lot of companies, they just get the penalties of BEE. They don't get any of the upside of complying with it. But if they want to continue doing business, they must comply with it. Otherwise, they won't be able to do business, or the state will fine them for not being compliant to BEE. And so they're in this weird scenario at the moment where there's physically nothing that they can do. Either lose all of your money complying with this asinine state requirement that may pay off if you get enough government contracts, or it won't pay off in the first place, or be fined into oblivion or be punished by some measurement by the government. So who benefits from this? Let me ask you guys, who do you think benefits from BEE? Evil greed equals BEE. Literal insanity, pay to play. David, very true. The determining, we're going to get to that. The question that you just raised there, yet the majority still votes for the parties to push it, we're going to get there. I promise you we're going to get there. Rupert, okay, David, that's one name. But it's bigger than that. It's not just Rupert. So when you actually combine a lot of different factors, so you have to look at this very holistically, to sort of zoom out and look from a wide angle at this. You will find that in the last 32 years of freedom, South Africa has added just 2 new companies to the JSE Top 100. Just 2. All of the other companies in the JSE Top 100 are companies that were created prior to 1994. So in other words, apartheid companies that are legacy companies that still reign. What is insane about that is we're one of the only countries where that actually happened. I mean, we've lived through the internet boom, and the internet boom came with how many massive companies were created as a result of the internet boom. You think of companies like Amazon, Google, YouTube, Twitch, even Temu or Temu, however the hell you want to pronounce it, right? TikTok. All companies that boomed as a result of the internet boom. Then you think about the AI boom that we've also lived through. How many companies were created as a result of the AI boom? Takealot is an outlier because they're actually losing money. They still haven't figured out how to be profitable. And I think Takealot is eventually going to get closed down by Amazon, because now that Amazon is in full swing here in South Africa, there's no way that Takealot continues, because Amazon has a very interesting business model. Anyone that sort of has watched videos or read anything about Jeff Bezos will understand. So the way Amazon does business whenever they enter a country is they take the significant amount of money that they make out of data centers, because here's the thing. Amazon does not make its money from its online business, retail business. The online retail business is just a nice to have. That's not where Amazon's money comes from. Amazon's money comes from data centers. That's their big bucks. So what Amazon does, and you'll know that Amazon data centers are already active here in South Africa. Amazon is not BEE compliant, not officially. The way Amazon's compliance works is they have to give about 26% of their profits or turnover every single year. They have to invest in the economy of South Africa. So they're under a preferential BEE exclusionary act, which Microsoft is under as well. There's a number of large companies that is under that. This is how we know that the Starlink thing is completely ideological, because we have companies that are excluded from BEE, but the government refuses to do that for Starlink. And yeah, it's literally called Equity Equivalence Programs. Thank you, Echo. That's the name of the company. But Amazon is under that. So what Amazon does is, and the Amazon data centers are already up. They're making millions from South Africans and South African businesses using their data centers. So what they do now is they open their retail business and they sell almost everything at a loss. They make it so cheap that no one can compete with them. They'll lose money. They don't care, because their data center is printing money. They don't care about the retail side of it. So they'll just keep selling at a loss, and effectively what they're doing is they're now closing down Takealot. What will also happen, and this is something that Amazon has also employed over the course of its history, if there are very popular South African brands, so there are companies in South Africa that make things that a lot of South Africans buy, Amazon will squeeze out those companies. They'll literally start making the same product, just cheaper, until that company falls or is so close to falling that Amazon can just move in and buy the company. And then that company starts making Amazon goods. right? Amazon Essentials is what they're called. These are companies that make stuff. They used to be their own company, but now they belong to Amazon. And so Amazon just slowly but surely corners the market, and then they take it. And once they've taken it, they're going to buy out Takealot. They'll effectively move in, buy all of their distribution centers, and then we'll have Amazon, which, as far as monopolies go, is not the worst monopoly in the world. There's a reason why Amazon has been able to be a monopoly throughout the world, because their services work. They sell things for really cheap. And when you buy, I just saw Amazon Prime opened here in South Africa, and you can now pay, I think it's 59 Rand a month for same day deliveries and free delivery, which is a great deal, right? And they do that throughout the whole world. Everyone in the world has that deal. You take Amazon Prime and you get same day deliveries on most goods, as well as free delivery, which, why wouldn't you do that, right? And what Amazon does in the rest of the world, which they're probably going to start doing here in South Africa, is they're going to start selling groceries. Because that's what they do in the rest of the world. Most people in America don't really go to shops anymore, or a lot of people, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people in America don't even go to shops anymore. You just order what you want on Amazon, and they'll deliver it for free with Prime to your doorstep same day. Who's that going to compete with? Checkers, 60/60. Because right now, 60/60, I think, does charge a delivery fee. So obviously, that's going to put 60/60 under an immense amount of pressure to also drop it. So fundamentally, service too, but I mostly use it for shopping. Gamers Republic, I have Prime video streaming. I love Prime. It's a really fun service. It's much cheaper than Netflix, and most of the shows that I watch is on Prime anyway, so I don't really mind. Plus, Warhammer, the live action Warhammer show is coming to Prime, so I'm going to be signing up to Prime literally until that comes out, at least, so that I can watch that. But effectively, this is how Amazon plays. So Takealot is in trouble, but that's a bit of a side story. The fact of the matter is, when you start to look at this, the fact that only two companies have managed to break into the top 100 of the JSE in the last 32 years, the fact that it costs companies up to the tune of 307% of their profits just to be BEE compliant, the entirety of BEE exists for one purpose: to protect legacy money. You know that donation from the Oppenheimers to the DA? Yeah. Protect our money. We don't want competition. The second you start looking at BEE in that way, it makes a lot more sense. It makes sense why the ANC will not even open discussions about BEE. They will not even open discussions about BEE. Because the ANC knows there is no evidence that BEE is growing the economy or making the lives of Black people better at all. There's zero evidence of that. So discussing BEE would open up the ANC to that reality. But of course, that was never the intended purpose of BEE. The purpose of BEE is to protect the interests of legacy money. Rupert, Oppenheimers, there's a number of other sort of less known individuals. But ultimately, what all regulation does, and it's important that people understand this, regulation, and specifically government regulations around business, almost always have the negative side effect of making it harder for new people to do business. Because the established companies have little trouble competing because they're already established. They have the lawyers, they have the money, they can go and move very quickly to adhere to compliance. It's the new guys that come in that don't yet have it. I'll give you guys a great example. There is a bank in South Africa, and I've spoken about this before. There is a bank in South Africa, and I won't say which bank, because if I say that, they might be able to figure out who told me this, but I have this on incredibly good authority. There is a bank in South Africa that employs about more than 10,000 people. Let me say that. I don't want to give specifics away. They employ more than 10,000 people. They need, in terms of actually doing their work, about 3,000 people. That's what they need to operate relatively successfully. And to make it easy, they would need at a maximum about 6,000 people to work for them. But they employ 13,000 people. Why? BEE compliance. The bank can't take the uneducated masses and give them jobs to be BEE compliant because they're uneducated. They don't know how to do the job that they would be hired for. But the bank can also not take the people that are educated because that would make them not BEE compliant. And so what do? Well, they're forced to hire extra people. So when they hire a white guy to do his job, they also have to hire 10 other guys to just sit around because they have to be BEE compliant. This is why a lot of these big companies are starting to complain about EE, employment equity. Because if BEE is forcing a company to overhire by about 500%, employment equity is going to force companies to overhire about 300 to 3,000%, dependent on the company. Right? So then even the legacy money is going to be in serious trouble. Or I know of a very large company, a company that you guys almost every weekend around the Bri Fire will know very well, but I know of this company as well, that have effectively changed their entire business model to be BEE compliant. Insofar as at the tippity top of management in every single department, they have a small team of people that make all of the plans. And then they have a bunch of monkeys, effectively. And I don't mean the people are monkeys, because in this company, it actually reveals the true depth of destruction in South Africa's education system. They have a bunch of monkeys that sit there that effectively just look at screens. They don't do anything. Their only job is to look at that screen and press a couple of buttons when they see something happening. They've been trained, press the button when that happens and don't press the button when that happens. But it's mostly just for show so that they keep themselves busy because the bosses are making the plans. They're running the entire department. Everyone else just sort of has to be there so that they can be BEE compliant. And the guy that told me this, he worked for the company. And I said to him, okay, so this is what? A bunch of black guys. He said, no. White, black, colored, you name it. They can't work. They can't work. They have people, because this particular company only employs people that have a degree. They have young whites, young coloreds, young Indians, young black people coming into their company with degrees that can't do the job. They don't know how to do the job. So they just stick them there and just sort of go, there you go. You know, it is what it is. They'll just keep the seats warm. So you effectively have a tiny group of people that is doing all of the work. Everyone else is just sort of employed so that they can be BEE compliant. And Bob's your uncle. Now, put yourself in that position. Imagine you're a new company. Imagine you want to start a new bank in South Africa. You already need an insane amount of capital to start this new bank because banks require an insane amount of capital. But then on top of it, you can't just go and hire 50 people to, do your job and make the company work. You have to go and hire 300 people. 50 of them will do the work. The other 250 is just so that you can be compliant to BEE. New companies often don't have that kind of money. And so it means I can't open my business. I want to, but I can't. You want to start a new farm in South Africa, or maybe a new manufacturer, food manufacturer. You'd love to start it. The problem is You don't have all of the money in the world. You have a small amount of money. And so what you do is you start your factory, you hire the bare essential personnel, and you start making a product that the people of South Africa want. And a month later, the government knocks on your door and goes, "Excuse me, are you BEE compliant?" "No, I'm not. I only have 50 people working for me." "Well, in that case, here's some fines for you." And what does the company do? Well, it either closes its doors, sells to another company, or it starts hiring a lot more people to be BE compliant. See, now, when you start putting all of this together, you start to understand the DA can't be anti BEE. Because for the DA to be anti BEE, it would piss off their investors. The people that are funding them would be very angry if the DA suddenly decided to open the markets and allow everyone to compete. These guys are making way too much money. And by the way, they also like the fact that the Rand is weak, which is another thing. The Rand's weakness helps them. The fact that the country isn't doing so hot economically, it's good for them. Because weak currencies is bad for everyone who lives in the country and earns in the country, but it's great for exports. It's amazing for exports. So these guys have a vested interest in ensuring that South Africa doesn't do that well. Because if the Rand was a one-to-one with the dollar, something that is not impossible, we did that before, or if the Rand was a one-to-one with the pound, it becomes very difficult to export. Because then our stuff actually becomes expensive to the rest of the world. These guys are making way too much money to ever allow that to happen. So it's this careful balancing act. We don't want the Rand to get too weak, because that would be bad for us. But we also don't want the Rand to get too strong, because that will be bad for us too. So we need to keep the country just weak enough and bad enough that it doesn't, ruin our plans one way or the other. When you start to look at it this way, you start to realize that we're not voting for political parties in this country with different views and different ideas. We're voting simply for the next company to tell us a sweet little lie. Now, I want to show you guys what is possible. What can be done. I know they also had an article, although I saw it somewhere else, so I can go look for it elsewhere if needs be. Um, Here we go. This is the country that the world should be looking at. Before we get into the story, let me see what you guys have to say. So it effectively a government grant with extra steps. They're determining pretty much the reason I have to be totally independent or magically find work. Lol, what a joke. Siege Garden. Yeah. Paying people to do nothing or get a company to buy shares with arrangements that the owner is still in control and use their BE status. Like, wait, Pluspect overs this to business. James, well, there's a bunch of different ways, right, that these companies can ultimately sort of circumvent, but it all ultimately just plays into the hands of a select few people who are getting very rich here in South Africa. Anita, how you doing? So up until now, do you guys have any questions? Anything that I skipped over, or anything that you think I didn't cover enough to sort of make the case for why the South African landscape looks the way that it does? Before we move on to this story, because Javier Milei, I believe that Javier Milei is the greatest thorn in the side of leftists everywhere. So since no one is saying anything, I will assume that you guys are either driving busy or you're doing your own thing. He must be. This is the first I'm hearing of him in a while. So Javier Milei comes into Argentina, and at the time, Argentina is, well, let's just say if South Africa is screwed, Argentina was completely effed. Argentina has 200% inflation. Argentina is absolutely bankrupt. Nothing is working. Nothing. And it should be noted, Argentina this wasn't something that happened to Argentina. Argentina did this to themselves because, much like in South Africa, Argentina had a very left-wing government that increasingly made all manner of super stupid decisions. Much like we have here in South Africa with BEE status destroying the economy, with the government stealing money, with corruption, with government overspending, government overtaxing its citizens. It was basically a hodgepodge of all the worst decisions a government can make. And what is really scary is when you really start to learn about Argentina, it looks like the ANC took the Argentinian model and just copied it. This looks like a good place to start. We'll do exactly what these guys did. So Javier Milei comes in after the people of Argentina have spent 100 years, and this is the thing that should make every South African depressed because it means it could take 100 years for people to finally wake up. But after 100 years of empty promises by the left, the Argentinian people finally wake up and say enough. And they vote for a man that quite literally eccentric doesn't even begin to cover this guy. I mean, on the campaign trail, this man had a chainsaw to show what he's going to do to government spending and to the government budget. He was going to cut all of it into pieces, and he did. This is one of the success stories of Argentina. So Javier Milei comes in, and by the way, he's an economist. He was a professor in economics. He is a qualified economist. And so he comes in with an absolute free market approach. Among the things that he did was immediately started cutting government spending significantly. This, by the way, was something that economists around the world said would destroy Argentina. The fact that he cut government spending. He also told the Reserve Bank of Argentina to stop printing money. Another thing that economists around the world, the experts, told him would destroy Argentina. Because according to them, what Argentina needs is more government spending. The spending should just be done well, right? The government should just spend on the right things. Javier Milei has no interest in that. He effectively puts the country on one of the biggest austerity measures you have ever seen in your entire life. And it does exactly what one would expect it to do. Last year, if you guys remember, Argentina needed to get a bailout from the American government because, as was expected, the moves that Javier Milei was making investors very, very uncomfortable. Investors in the modern world have never seen what capitalism looks like. And so when they saw this, they didn't know what was going to happen. But it turns out he was not wrong. Argentina, let me read this for you because it's absolutely insane. One of Milei's most significant achievements has been the collapse in inflation. Consumer price growth, which had approached 300% at the start of 2024, has fallen dramatically. Inflation is expected to decline to around 30% during 2026, from 300% to just 30% in 2 years. That's what he's been able to do. Argentina has also achieved something that had eluded successive governments for years, a budget surplus. In other words, the state is now spending less money than what it's getting in taxes. And it should be noted, Javier also cut taxes. He also got rid of a lot of taxes. He removed a lot of regulation. that was holding the country back. The overall surplus amounted to 0.3% of GDP. It's a small surplus, but think about this. The government, up until this point, had always operated with massive deficits. So effectively, the government was just constantly borrowing money to make the thing work. Ultimately, Malay cut that, and now the government is actually saving money, not overspending. Economic growth has returned as stability has improved. Argentina's economy expanded by 4.4% during 2025, driven by agriculture, mining, energy production, and financial services. Economists expect growth to continue through 2026, supported by rising exports, increased investment, and expanding mining and energy sectors. Investor sentiment has strengthened alongside the improving economic data. Argentina's country risk premium has declined significantly as markets have gained confidence that the government will maintain fiscal discipline. Effectively, Javier Milei has done all of the things that modern economists tell you should never do, because modern economists follow the Keynesian model of economics, which effectively says that a government can spend itself out of trouble. This is the Keynesian model, right? A government can spend and spend and spend until it has achieved growth. Here's the problem with that. It applies to only one country in the world, and that's America. For all other countries in the world, spending means bankruptcy. Now, the one thing that has saved us here in South Africa up until now has been the fact that the ANC, for all of their stupidity, has never really gone into printing mode. We spend a lot more money than we actually make, although for the last few years, we've been able, under Enoch Godongwana, we've been able to achieve some kind of budget surplus. So we're not borrowing at least any more money, although that does not include the repayment of debt, because once you include the repayment of debt, we do actually borrow money to repay our debts. So we're growing the debt whilst, repaying the debt with the money that we just borrowed to repay the debt. But never mind. For some reason, we don't include that in the books. I don't know how that would go off with SARS or with the bank if you tried to do that. But I'm assuming at some point the bank is going to say, you can't just keep borrowing money from us to pay back the money that you've borrowed from us. This is a scam at this point. But nevertheless, that's how it works here in South Africa. But the government, for the most part, has not gone into a printing frenzy. And one of the things that have saved South Africa, and we're getting into a bit of economics here, if you guys will permit me, is the fact that our reserve bank is the one reserve bank in the world, that I know of at least, that has a single mandate. So in all other countries, especially in America, because America started it and the rest of the world decided to copy it like morons, America decided that their reserve bank, or the Federal Reserve, will have a dual mandate. So the mandate of the Federal Reserve is, one, to protect the currency, and two, to facilitate economic growth. Now, you might say, but shouldn't that be? Because that's what the EFF is asking. The EFF wants to nationalize the Reserve Bank of South Africa because they think the Reserve Bank should be in the business of growing the economy. Now, here's the interesting thing. In order to protect the currency, a central bank will oftentimes be forced to destroy the economy. If the central bank needs to protect the economy, it will oftentimes be forced to destroy the currency. Because you see, the two go hand in hand. The central bank can only do one thing, and that is apply interest rates. It's the only thing the central bank does. It moves interest rates up or it moves it down. Based on what? Well, the key economic indicator for the central bank to decide whether or not interest rates should go up or down is inflation. And they're looking specifically at core inflation, which is a whole new bag of nonsense. But nevertheless, they look at inflation. Why? Because inflation is the rate at which your currency depreciates in value. That's what inflation is. People think inflation is how prices are increasing. No, inflation is just how weak your currency is getting. And the way to offset that inflation is to increase interest rates. So if inflation is, say, 4%, the Reserve Bank would need to get interest rates to 4% in order to offset. They can't do that, though, because that would absolutely destroy an economy. So what they do instead is they go for a target. So they say inflation is at 4%. We'll target 2.5% inflation interest rates, and over time it will lower inflation. So why are they doing that? And by the way, I'm getting to the asinine nature of world politics under the left. They're doing that because if inflation is high, it's usually because of two things. Either you have demand side inflation. In other words, the suppliers can't supply enough product to meet the demand. And so the price will go up in order to lower demand, right? Because it always has to be in equilibrium. Or you have supply side inflation. In other words, it's costing suppliers too much to actually make the product, and therefore the product is super expensive. Which of these two do you think apply in South Africa? Do you think we have demand side inflation, or do you think we have supply side inflation? Both, okay. Supply, okay. So South Africa actually has one of the most unique types of inflation on earth. We don't have demand side inflation. There is not enough demand for the products that we sell. In fact, that's one of the problems. There's not enough people to buy the stuff that people are making. And so consumers or producers in South Africa are oftentimes forced to sell things at higher prices just to make money because there is such a tiny base of consumers for the goods that they make. But then we do, to an extent, have supply side inflation as well. So that could be seen as a type of demand side inflation insofar as there's not enough demand. The supply side inflation comes from the fact that our energy and our business environment is some of the most expensive in the world. And so it's just super expensive to produce things in South Africa. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do you imagine that higher interest rates can actually solve that issue? The answer is no, by the way. Just making something more expensive isn't magically going to increase the amount of demand so that producers actually have enough people to sell to. And just making debt more expensive by increasing interest rates, you are also killing the suppliers because they have to make debt in order to increase their manufacturing base. So our Reserve Bank is actually killing the economy on both sides. But here's the issue. They can't fix it. If they lower interest rates, inflation will get out of control because the tiny base of demand will then go absolutely apeshit on debt. Our economy isn't struggling. Our rand isn't struggling because of the Reserve Bank. Our rand is struggling because of the government. Our suppliers aren't struggling because of interest rates. They're struggling because of the ANC. Our demand or consumers aren't struggling because of interest rates, they're struggling because of the ANC. The Reserve Bank literally can't fix the problem. All they can do is stop the problem from running away. The issue is that the medication that the Reserve Bank is supplying South Africa cures, or at least manages, a symptom, but it can't cure the disease. Because the disease is the government. This is where, if the ANC was actually smart, they would phone Javier Milei and they would say to him, please come teach us what to do. Please come teach us what to do. You have fixed a country that was far worse than us. Guys, I need to make this clear. Argentina had an economic growth rate of 4.4%. Argentina, for the last 100 years, have had negative economic growth. South Africa manages around 1%. Argentina was minus percentages. Their economy was basically getting smaller every single year on average throughout the entire last 100 years of its existence. And in 3 years, Javier Milei has flipped it to a 4.4% growth rate this year. And economists actually predict that it will go even further. And as is the nature of economies, when economies start to do well, it's exponential. So if it's 4.4% this year, it's likely to be 5, maybe even 5.5% next year, 6 point. It's going to go up because of how far behind Argentina already is. Now, at some point, the government will have to start putting on the brakes because you don't want the economy to grow too fast, because you need to make sure that you can keep up with things like infrastructure and infrastructure growth. Because what oftentimes happens, if an economy grows too fast, it can run out of the actual infrastructure, the support network to support this burgeoning new economy that's going up. So the government might have to be forced to put some brakes on it at some point. But for the most part, Argentina's economy is exploding. It's literally on the verge of exploding. Except South Africa does not care. The ANC won't even pay attention to it. And it is so simple. Because all Javier Milei did was he cut government spending. All these useless programs like grants and BEE and employment equity and affirmative action. And I just saw another thing. By the way, if you're not angry yet, this should help. You know, guys, it is weekend, and I want to make sure that you enter this weekend with vigor and a fire in your belly. So, FYI, if you do own a car in South Africa, congratulations. You're about to pay more money to the state. And the reason for that is the ANC mismanaged the Road Accident Fund in South Africa to the point where the Road Accident Fund of South Africa is broke. And because it is broke, now, FYI, you're already paying for the Road Accident Fund in South Africa with every liter of oil or petrol, not oil, well, oil too, if you put that in your car, although people rarely put a liter of oil in their car. But maybe some of you, I don't know, run tractors or whatever. But with every liter of petrol or diesel that you put in your car, you are giving money to the Road Accident Fund. The ANC stole that money. And so now, the Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, has revealed that her department is planning to tax South African motorists even more to support the Road Accident Fund. The new tax is a proposed mandatory fee attached to annual vehicle license disc renewals and vehicle registration. Matty, how are you doing, sir? So, by the way, most of you will know that you already pay a fee for your license disc. Well, that's going to be an extra fee. Every single year when you have to re-register your car because for some reason that's required, you will now also pay an extra fee on top of it for the Road Accident Fund. You'll still be paying it for it on the petrol, by the way. That's not they're not replacing the petrol one. That's still being taxed. You're also not going to not have toll roads. That's still being taxed. You're just now going to have another tax on top of all of the taxes that you're already paying. Now, I just want to give you guys a bit of mathematics here because it is important. So if you're an ordinary South African citizen, let's just quickly look at all the taxes that you're paying. If you own a home or if you rent a home, a part of that goes for property taxes, which every single person in this country pays either through their rent or through owning a property. If you make a salary, you pay income taxes. With that salary, you buy stuff. There's VAT on those taxes. Then you put fuel in your car. There's taxes on top of the fuel, including taxes to the road accident fund, which obviously you have to pay. Then there is the tax of renewing your driver's license every 5 years. There is the tax of renewing your car license every year. There is, what taxes have I missed, ladies and gentlemen? Because I'm sure there's more. There's the rates and taxes that you and I pay every single year. There's the tax on electricity that we pay. There's the tax on water that we pay. I know I've missed stuff. Oh, there's the toll roads that you and I pay for. And now the government is, I think I did include VAT. And now there is also the added new RAF mandatory fee on the licensing disc that you and I will be paying. Now, if you and I were to include the hidden taxes, so that's all of the taxes that you and I pay every single month to this government, whether we want to or not, that is what you have to pay in order to exist in this country. But let's you and I, oh, by the way, if you buy a car, that's also VAT and taxes and all the rest of it that goes in the car. So, there's more VAT and taxes and all the rest of it. But here is the kicker. Let's you and I compare the hidden taxes. Those are all the taxes that the government already takes. Hidden taxes, school fees. When you and I pay taxes, those taxes include taxes for education. You and I pay for education to the government. Except if you and I want our children to be slightly more educated than a garden chair, we will pay for schooling. We'll send them to a public school, C class or C grade school that actually is good. So we'll pay for schooling. That's a hidden tax because you're already paying taxes for education, but now you're also paying taxes for education. Private security. Now, some of you might say, but I don't have private security. If you live in a complex, you do have private security. That's where your levies go to pay for the private security. You are paying taxes for the police, but you're also paying taxes for your private security because the police doesn't actually do their jobs. So there's a hidden tax right there. Medical aid. You and I, as part of our taxes, every single year, pay for healthcare. There are government hospitals all over this country that you can go to free of charge if you want to die. So if you're very ill, if you have a knife sticking out of your neck, you can go to the public hospital. They'll pull out the knife. You'll die. It's cheaper than going to a private hospital. But if you want to live, public hospital is probably not where you want to go. Effectively, the fee that you and I pay to healthcare in this country is to get a nice place to die. If you want to live, on the other hand, you have to pay for private healthcare. That's a hidden tax. I have no problem paying for private healthcare. I don't like the fact that I'm paying for public healthcare as well, but I can't use the public healthcare because it's absolute dog poo, so I'm forced to use the private one. Now, I am certain that there are hundreds more of these hidden taxes that you and I pay every single month because we have to, because the state doesn't work. And what does the government of South Africa do? They try and figure out where are more places to steal from? Where can we steal more? I mean, the South African public genuinely can't afford to pay any more of this. Like, how are we supposed to pay this? Like, at what point does the ANC realize the South African taxpayer has nothing left to give? We've been cleaned out effectively. I don't think they'll ever realize that. I don't think they really care. Um, Matty, so Stefan, how are you doing, sir? Cape Town's hospitals aren't super bad. Um, but I can share my own experience, right? Because contrary to popular belief, politics in South Africa doesn't pay well enough for me to have private healthcare, right? I don't have a medical aid. I used to, but I had to let that go. Um, and so, luckily, I'm not a very sickly guy. I know looks strange, but I don't have diabetes. I don't have any sort of weird illnesses by God's grace. But maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, I had a very weird thing. I still don't really know what actually happened. But I woke up one morning and I had this literally blinding pain in my chest, like literally right here. Just this incredible pain. It felt, um, when there's like wind stuck almost. That's what it sort of felt like. It felt like if I could just uh, burp, it'll loosen up, but it didn't. So I had this pain the entire day. And at around, I think, 6 or 7 o'clock, um, I couldn't take it anymore. Like I was in bed the entire day. Didn't know, like I couldn't handle it. And so around 6 or 7 o'clock, I finally decided, okay, I need to go to the hospital. Now, at this point, I had already given up my private medical aid, so I have to go to a public hospital here. As I walk in, I realize this is going to be a while. This is going to be a while because it's packed. It's absolutely packed. I get to the front of the queue. I book. I get booked. Now I have to sit down. At around 11 o'clock, they call me into the hospital. I'm still sitting in the outside of the hospital. Now they call me into the hospital. It's 11 o'clock at night. I go in, and again, just queues. People sitting in queues. So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting, and I think to myself, okay, how long can this be? About 11:45, I hear the people next to me speak. And the guy says their number, I think their number 16th or 13th in the queue. And so I look at him, and I'm like, because they were there before I got in. I say to him, when did you get here? And he's like, oh, we've been waiting since 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'm like, wait, what? You've been sitting here since 2 o'clock this afternoon, and you are 13th or 16th in the queue? Uh, what the hell do you mean? And he told me they had brought his mother the like month or so prior, and they sat at that hospital for over 24 hours to get a doctor. So yes, technically speaking, when you finally get into the hospital, the hospitals aren't too bad, but it's getting into the hospital to actually see a doctor here in Cape Town that you'll probably die before you see anyone. Luckily, I literally just decided to go home. I was like, yeah, never mind this. I'm going home. I'll deal with it on my own. And as I was driving home, the pain started to subside. So it turns out I was taking a specific type of medication, and I had stopped the medication because I had fixed my diet. The problem was my body was having a violent reaction to the medication being stopped. And what happened is my stomach started to create far too much acid, and that acid then sort of burnt the outside of the trachea, and so it was on the mend, and I've never had that problem again. And I've been off the medication since. So hopefully that problem will never return. But the point is, even here in the Cape, the hospitals are not. You'll still die before you see a doctor. I'm in Cape Town, and two of my family members died in public hospital due to bad services, and they are dirty. People literally die on their hospital beds, and they don't notice it for a long while. Glad you're okay, bro. Matty, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, like I said, by the grace of God, C says, "How you doing, sir?" By the grace of God, I'm not I'm not a sickly guy, right? I'll get flu like everyone else, but I don't have chronic illnesses or chronic issues of any kind. So luckily that has not happened to me. So I don't really need anything. But I think if you are a sick guy in South Africa, you're gonna need private healthcare. Doing well, Simon, and you? I'm doing very well. Cesius, can't complain. I mean, I can complain, and I do complain. That's what these live streams are all about. I'm complaining about the ANC and the BS that they pull. Hey, Vicus Extend, thank you so much for the 350 Rand donation, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, sir. I hope you will have a wonderful weekend. That donation is very, very cool. Thank you so much, sir. My stepfather died due to negligence in hospitals. I know of so many doctors because I have a family full of doctors, and so many of the family members that I have, they couldn't wait to get out of public hospital because all of them say the same thing. Understaffed, underfunded. As a doctor, you're oftentimes forced to work double shifts. In fact, I have a friend who told me that when she was doing her Zuma year, she had to do triple shifts sometimes just because they didn't have enough doctors and they didn't have money to get more doctors. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but would you want to have a doctor see you in a life or death situation when they're on their third shift? I mean, we're going on 36 hours awake at this point. I mean, at that point, that doctor is wildly compromised and overtired. So it is just, it's a nightmare, this country. I thought we are years different being a Karen. Even the staff in private hospitals have terrible hygiene practices. There are some that's good. I've been to a few. I was in California hospital, stayed in casualties for 3 days with blood clots in my lung before I was attended to. James, I'm so sorry that happened. My gran died in waiting room. My mom got told she had bronchitis. Meanwhile, she had a collapsed lung, also passed due to misdiagnosis. Dude, I have a story. Probably one of the saddest stories I've ever experienced personally. Now, I can't say if this was actually in a public. I think it was a public hospital. I don't think these people were anywhere near rich enough that they could afford private healthcare. But these are friends of ours. Like, I grew up, the lady I've known since I was a child, right? And she was beautiful. She was she was one of the most beautiful women I knew growing up, right? She got stung by a bee. Literally a bee sting. Now, you would think a bee sting is run of the mill, right? She went into the hospital. She tried to tell the doctor, right, that she was stung by a bee. Her throat was closing up. She was having trouble. The doctor literally could not care less. Now, I don't know the exact particulars because I can't remember it because this was years and years and years ago. But the doctor decided to inject her, I think, with adrenaline. But he gave her way too much adrenaline, like way too much. and she ended up suffering a number of strokes as a result of this doctor's asinine decision. Um, this lady went from one of the most beautiful women I've ever known to the entire one half of her body non functioning. When she smiles, this side is completely dead. She can't use this arm. She can't use this leg. A cripple for the rest of her life. To this day, the doctor in the hospital refuses to admit fault. Just refuse. Saying, no, they did nothing wrong. They followed procedure. Exactly. So I wonder how many of these stories South Africans can actually tell. Like, how many people have stories similar to that? Private and my mom faced a wall of lawyers. The family has still not recovered. The doctors were great people and on the ball. The nurses, however. Oh, I have family members who are nurses as well, which almost all of them are now, I think, actually, yeah, all of them now work in private clinics, not hospitals, private clinics. Because one of the stories I heard, now I can only speak from the perspective of this person that told me this. If it is true, it's because they were truthful. If it isn't, it's because they lied, because I only have their side of the story. But I was effectively told, if you're a nurse in hospital trying to do your job, your life will be made a living hell. I have the same story from a policeman. A guy that was in the police force since before 1994, who effectively told me, when you're in the police force, there's a rule amongst the good cops. Don't stand out. You work the same way that they do. If they take lunch from 11 o'clock until 2 o'clock, you take lunch from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. If they leave 3:15, you leave 3:15. You don't do your job correctly. Because if you do, you will inevitably lose it. They will come up with a way to blame you or to call you racist or to do this, to do that. They'll make sure that you're destroyed because they will say you're making them look bad. The same is true for hospitals. The same is true for this state is effectively a joke. That's just the short and the long of it. The bucket of crab mentality that infect the whole civil service. Yeah, but it's what happens, and this is one of the reasons I'm skeptical of anyone thinking that political parties can save South Africa. And I'll end the stream on this story. How do you fix a country like South Africa? Think about the layers and layers and levels of corruption that exist in this country. This state has effectively turned this entire country into one big criminal cartel with every single facet of civil service just sort of, you know, a different leg of the same cartel. How do you fix it? Like, what political party is going to walk into this country and actually change anything? It's when I think of things like that, I realize the only thing that can save South Africa is a reset. And I mean a hard reset. Now, you can take that to mean whatever you think it should mean. But a mere continuation of the political system will not fix it. Cannot fix it. The country is too far gone. If you think you're going to vote for a political party, everything we've discussed today, the amount of political parties that effectively belong to rich oligarchs that want to protect their own interests. All of the political parties in South Africa are funded by the same large corporations that will not allow them to do anything that can potentially fix this country because that would threaten their safety. Um, and when you realize that, I think you sort of realize anything short of a hard reset would be impossible. It can't be done. And a nation to stand up and get these corrupt people out of government. Shanta, not wrong. Unions have to go, and then political criminals have to go. The issue is, think about it this way, Christine. How you doing? If you remove the unions, the country will become ungovernable. The unions will make sure of that. If you remove the criminals, the country will become ungovernable. The unions will make sure of that. If you try to remove the corrupt, the country will become ungovernable because they will make sure of it. So how do you fix it? You can send the police to try and take care of the rioters, but the police will join the rioters against you. So you won't be able to do that because the police is as corrupt as the rest. You can send the military to try and take care of the problem, but again, the military is so far away from being operational that they won't be able to solve the issue either. So, and they're most likely also in cahoots with most of what is happening in the government. I don't mean all people. I know actually a few people who work in the military who are really good people, but of course, you're not talking about the entirety of the generals and everything else. So, what do you actually do here? How do you actually solve the problems of South Africa? It's not clear to me that it's possible. And by that, I don't mean that South Africa doesn't have a bright future, because I genuinely believe we do. I think the big problem that we have here in South Africa is that that future is only going to be capable of being achieved through a hard reset. Hulle sê van ons land het net een ou soos Trump nodig wat absoluut skoonmaak en almal fire wat nie sy werk reg doen nie. Um and then so the way Eddie's Yen, how you doing? So the way you would have to do that, and I have spent a considerable amount of time thinking about this problem. So the way you would have to do that is, as soon as you get in, you would have to start effectively a shadow wing of the police force. You'd have to start recruiting for a brand new police force, one that has nothing to do with the corrupt police force that exists right now. And you would have to do it in such a way that the current police force doesn't think that this police force is literally being created to arrest them. Then, once that police force has become strong enough and well equipped enough, you would need to set up an entire intelligence network to figure out who are all the corrupt people. You need to figure that out. Where are all the corrupt networks and where do they go? Yeah, you'd effectively need to create something like the SS without the Jews and the burning. But you would need to create something like that, like a secret police that is going to police the police. And then once that order has gotten strong enough and you've got the intelligence to know where all of these networks run, you would need to collapse on these groups in one night. It can't be generally just, taking people and, arresting people. It would need to be a single operation. In one night, you arrest everyone. Zero communication, zero notice, zero anything. So you would also need to set up special courts that aren't connected to the current corrupt court system in South Africa. These courts would then have to give you the subpoenas as well as the arrest warrants to actually arrest the thousands of politicians, police officers, criminal cartel members in this country. And then once you've arrested all of them, you need the intelligence network to now see who's trying to take their place, because that needs to be shut down as well. Then, once that has been done, now you're talking about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years before you'll be able to do it. So you're talking about 2 terms that has to happen over. Can't happen in one single presidential term. It would have to be 2. But here's what I would do following that. When all of these people are in custody, if you are found guilty of corruption, you'll get the death penalty. That will be the first thing that I pass in this country. Two types of crimes will get you guaranteed death penalty: murder and corruption. If you murder someone, if you're corrupt, that's it. And I don't mean the humane electric chair murder. No, we'll go back to the old days. We'll hang you. Good old fashioned in the town square hanging. So we'll go down to Church Square in Pretoria. We'll set up the stage, and you'll hang right in front of everyone. Because I do believe it's necessary for people to see that there are consequences to actions. And I think people will love it as well, right? It will be a spectacle. People can see all these corrupt criminals getting hanged. This would be a sort of Nuremberg, South African edition. Echo, that's effectively the idea. If I was president, that's exactly what would happen. We would have a Nuremberg. It would be the mass, adjudication of corruption in South Africa, trying to figure out who's guilty and who is not. No, we're environmentally friendly now. The ANC will never do that. They will never admit to being wrong about anything. They'll be implementing communism properly for the next century if allowed the opportunity. Rich Walker, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, right? Communism is never actually implemented properly. But no, I don't believe that the death penalty. So this is actually a quick aside, and I know I said I'm gonna finish with this story, but I'll just do this because I actually think the place where the death penalty completely lost all of its muster was the moment that. So originally, the death penalty was implemented on a principled basis, right? It was justice. If you took a life, you surrendered your right to life. That was the reasoning. And then, thanks to a lot of advocacy by human rights groups, the law changed. And they said, no. Actually, it should only be for grievous murders. So if someone is like a mass murderer or like murders someone in a very horrible way, the problem there is the second you do that, the death penalty has lost all moral defense. Because now the death penalty is just a punishment. It's no longer justice. Death for death is justice. You took a life, therefore your life is forfeit. The second you implement all sorts of humane requirements to it, you can just stop. Because the idea behind the death penalty was never to dissuade people from murdering. It was justice. You took a life, therefore you pay with your life. We're not trying to dissuade you from murdering people. If you want to murder someone, go for it, but then you know you're signing up for death yourself. That's the point of it. The prison system is supposed to correct behaviors, although it increasingly doesn't do that. So I wouldn't do something like tires, like necklacing as they used to go, because that would be, again, bringing it into just punishment, which isn't the goal. The goal is justice. You committed murder, you committed treason, you committed corruption, therefore you deserve to die. That's simple. And yes, I do believe corruption has to be met with murder or death by the state. And the reason for it is when you commit corruption as a government employee, you are stealing from the people. You're not stealing from your friend or from your boss. You're stealing from the people. You're stealing from people that need that money. The state is supposed to use that money to protect people. I can make all sorts of arguments. You're taking money away from, defense. Who's protecting the borders? You're taking money away from the police that's meant to keep women, children, and the innocent safe. Who's going to be doing that now that you've stolen a bunch of that money? So, from my perspective, there is just bam, right? You get the death penalty, you go. Because that is, in my opinion, that is a crime that should not be tolerated under any circumstances in a society. And since you've stolen from the people, it should not be required of the people to now pay for you. You don't get a holiday on the people's bill. You stole from the people, therefore we put you to death. End of discussion. Hello everyone. I am late, but I'm here with bells on. The end is now. How you doing, sir? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just about to finish up here. Correct? It's not just one person you're stealing from, it's millions. The tires, of course. Got to protect the trees somehow. My name is also Desiree. Desire. I'm not sure what's going on. The moment a person get reasons to argue why somebody must not receive back what he or she did is the moment you start thinking of excuses. Anita, yeah, but although I think what's oftentimes the problem is that good rules implemented by good, strong men for a society creates a well functioning and safe society, right? Um, the problem is that in that safety and function of the society, you inevitably get people that start to say, well, do we really need all of these rules? Like, surely some of these rules are a bit stupid, you know? Surely this isn't really necessary. Like, we can change this, it doesn't really matter. Um, and the problem is when you finally remove the rule, that's when you start to learn why that rule was there in the first place. What was that rule supposed to protect? You can take silly things as society has fallen. We go back 100 years, 150 years, and the dating landscape looks very different. 150 years, the idea of people sleeping together before marriage was completely unheard of. The vast majority of people did not engage in sexual relations before marriage. And we have the statistics of it. We know that most people didn't do it. And there were good reasons for it. If you were a woman, you wanted to keep your virginity because you wanted to marry a good man, and good men wasn't going to marry a non-virgin. If you were a man, for the most part, you wouldn't sleep around because at the same time, you want to sleep with a good woman, and the good women don't want to sleep with you until you marry them. Um, so it's actually a complete lie or myth that men were sleeping around with as many people as they want, and women were the ones who had to keep, sort of sacred. That's a complete myth. The vast majority of men also didn't sleep around. Um, I mean, it was bad at one point. I say bad now, but a woman could even go out with a man on her own. There would always be a chaperone. A man from her family would accompany them to make sure that she's safe, to make sure that this man doesn't take advantage of her. So we were very protective of women. And of course, the society sort of trucked along, and we eventually lost faith, and people started to sort of go, wow, this is just outdated. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. We started to ask the question, well, can we not just remove this? And we did. We removed it. So, what does the statistics show happened when we removed it? This is where things get really interesting. We have a divorce rate now that is out of control. We have abuse in marriages that are out of control. Because again, there is no evidence that women experienced more abuse in the past than what they experience today. In fact, most of the evidence we have from female groups actually show that female abuse was very rare in the olden days, right? If you go back 100, 150 years, women weren't experiencing massive amounts of domestic abuse. All of these rates are up. Now, here's where things get super interesting. I remember reading a study, this was a few years ago, and this was still for the gaming channel, but I was effectively making a video about the fall of society. And I believe Dr. Deborah So also spoke about this because she's done a lot of research on this. Men and women who do not engage in sexual relation before marriage have a 20% chance of divorce after getting married. 20%. So very low. Most marriages where sex is not involved in the marriage prior to marriage are super successful. If a couple lives together, so they're not sexually active, but they do live together before marriage, it flips. 80% chance of divorce. Just by living together. And the reason they take it as both is it's the exact same for couples that have sex before marriage, even if they don't live together. The second you have sex before marriage or you start living together before marriage, an 80% chance of divorce on those marriages. Doesn't mean that all of those marriages obviously work out into divorce, but 80% of marriages where they live together or slept together or both before marriage, 80% of those marriages don't work. They completely fail. Rates of domestic abuse go up as well, significantly, in couples that abstain from sex until marriage versus couples that don't. So, by every metric, the way we used to do things appear to be far better than the way we're doing things now. And this is something we're now starting to realize. We're now learning when we removed that barrier, we missed why that barrier existed in the first place. And now we're learning what that barrier was actually for. And I think we're gonna get we're gonna get similar things. Like there's gonna be similar revelations as time goes on. Is there a reason why? Robot. So obviously, as to the reasons, they can only speculate. We don't really know what the reasons are. Because obviously there's I mean there could be a million reasons why. They just know that statistically, if couples live together or sleep together before marriage, those marriages end in divorce at around 80% of the rates. Or 80% of them will end in divorce. Why that happens, that could be anyone's guess. If you were to ask me, I think a big part of that is trust. And even someone who might not express jealousy outright, if the girl that you're dating decides to sleep with you after a month of dating, the sacredness of that union becomes completely tainted. You will never view her as sacred or pure or perfect as you're supposed to do. because if she did that for you, she did that for others. So what is supposed to be something just for you is now just another thing. It's just sort of there, right? And I believe it's the same for women. I don't think so. They do show, and this is again something that a lot of men miss. Women have a higher threshold. So a woman is willing to tolerate more, but it gets really interesting. Women who have had, I believe it's 5 or more sexual partners in their lives, have no ability or a severely impaired ability to pair bond. 5 or more sexual partners. Now, pair bonding is super important for marriage because it's the bonding of a pair. It's the ability to connect with another person. 5 or more sexual partners, and that ability dies completely. From there, men become an asset. It becomes a thing that satisfies a need, but there's no connection, not a real connection. The connection becomes completely different. Men loses this ability too, just FYI. 10. 10 seems to be the general barrier. Men who have had 10 or more sexual partners will lose the ability to pair bond with any woman. Now, the reason you shouldn't play around with those numbers is it's different for every person. For one person, they can sleep with one person and it's gone. Another person, 2 or 3. Another person, maybe 6. Another person, 10, 11, 12. You don't know. But when it happens, it's gone. So I think there's maybe something to that. But I think the biggest part of it, and the thing that I wanted to say, women have a higher threshold. Men tend to lose respect on a fundamental level for a woman if they know that she has had sexual relations. Again, the studies has been done. When they show a man a woman, they will measure his response, his biological response to that woman. They will measure that response. And then when they tell that man, by the way, she's no longer a virgin, they see a marked dip in his response to, so he clearly views her as less valuable. Her value has declined instantly. One sexual partner, and there's an instant decline in value. Now, that doesn't, by the way, if you're a girl that has slept around, or maybe you've done, you've had a wild life. We all have. I'm not a virgin myself. That doesn't mean that can't come back, right? Through the grace of God and the right guy, he gets to know you. He sees a lot of the value. That can absolutely change, and it can come back. They're just talking about, you show someone a picture of a random girl he's never seen that he finds cute, and there's a response, and then they tell him she's no longer a virgin, and they see that there's a response, right? So it's natural. It's just a natural biological response. They find that for women, it's slightly higher. For most women, it looks like it's between 3 or 5. So if a woman knows that a man isn't a virgin, okay. If she finds out that he slept with 3 women, there's already a marked decline in her respect for him. By 5, most women have lost a lot of respect, right? Because it is ultimately that thing of, you're mine and I'm yours, and that's supposed to be sacred. So I think that might have something to do with it. I don't know. What I can tell you, and this is this is something I will die on this hill. God created us. And God created us in a very specific manner for a very specific purpose, to do things in very specific ways. And by his grace, God gave us a manual for these things. God told us how he made us and what we were made for. And so I believe that if you stick to that, it works. And if you don't stick to that, you're ultimately trying to go against your own user manual. You have a user manual, you're trying to go outside that, but you were not made for that. So it doesn't work. That all comes down to their childhood upbringing and struggles in their mom and dad's marriages. I hear you and get your train of thought there. But like I said, I to the exact no, I can't answer that. I At least in the studies that I've seen, the researchers don't even begin to try and explain why it's happening because they don't know. They just see that it is happening. They see the data on it at least. Women's rights. Yeah, if you know where those rights come from, you'll know that it isn't even from women. The vast majority of women did not want those rights. The vast majority of women weren't asking for the right to sleep around as much as they want. In fact, the feminist movement, at the height of the feminist movement, about 8.3% of all Americans declared themselves, American women declared themselves feminists. 8.3% at the height of its movement, at the height of getting all of its sort of demands. 8.3% of American women actually declared themselves feminists. Even today, I believe it's something like 12% of women in America consider themselves feminists. The vast majority of women worldwide do not consider themselves feminists. And I will say, just in my own experience, the second a woman, and I don't care how hard ass she is, the second she comes in contact with a real man, and I don't mean real man, macho man, breaking things or punching people in the bar. That's not a real man. A man that has his crap together, that takes care of himself, and that she can see, means business. That hard ass woman, I have seen it time and again, melts. She becomes this little puppy that will just, whatever he says, she will do. So I think it is a natural part of it, but I also feel sorry for women in this regard because I think a lot of men have become less than worthy of submission. I mean, I just look at the men in my immediate vicinity, and I don't mean the men at my church because it was at my church that I, for the first time, saw what a man is actually supposed to be. I mean, I saw it in my dad, but for a big part of my life, I didn't really grow up with my dad. Um, Bad decisions on my part. Um, but it was at my church that I saw what a man should actually look like and what a man should actually do. Um, but I look at men who aren't in the church and men that I've known, and I feel sorry for women. Like, you have to submit to that. The guy doesn't even know who he is. He has no interest in doing anything. He doesn't take care of his business. I know so many guys who think that once the ring is on the finger, that's job done. Thanks for playing. Uh, and I have to submit to this. I have to follow this. Why? And so I understand why a lot of women go, why? Because God commands it, should be enough. But at the same time, I understand if you're not a Christian, you're looking at this dude that, quite frankly, looks like me. I'm not married, so you can't judge me. You're not married to me either, so screw you. But you look at a guy that looks like me, right? Nice big belly. He comes home from his mediocre job, plops himself on the couch. You work a whole day as well because he's not taking care of his business, so he's not we're making enough to retire you. But now you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to do all of these other things while he's just sitting there. I can understand why a lot of women are going, "What the hell is this?" Right? Like this is bullshit. Excuse my French. Uh, so yeah, I think we have a lot of trouble or problems across the board with men not knowing what men are supposed to be, women not understanding what they're supposed to be, and it just creates a mess all around. Attended wedding last week and noticed all the couples in their 40s plus are still married. It was heartwarming to see. Sonia, how you doing? Yeah, I think older couples, um, obviously, I think got married on different pretenses and under different pretenses. I think as time has gone on, You can see the nonsense that Hollywood tries to sell and the sort of, just idiocy that comes with all of that. But, anyways, I'm not married, so I really can't give any real advice on marriage. What I give you is theoretical at best. So I would say everything that I said about marriage, take it with a pinch of salt. Or if you don't agree with me, just go, Stephen, you're not married. You don't know what you're talking about. That would be a fair assessment. Because I really don't know what I'm talking about. I've never been married. So I can just say, this is what I theoretically think, and that's the end of it. Luckily for me, new research tends to or shows that men are at their most desirable between the ages of 40 and 50. I might get married at some point. We'll see. Men not knowing what they are meant to do comes from many things. Primarily, though, it comes from fathers not being around to pass the lessons. True, Echo. Rebuilding is worth it, so I refuse to give up, even after all I've been through. Siege, no one is giving up, but we have to be honest, right? And say, it is going to be hard. It's going to be very hard. Identity crisis takes years with guidance to get that right. True. Well, I am of great stream today. Thanks, Stephen. God bless you. Robot, and to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for coming out and for hanging out and spending your Friday afternoon with me. It has been my absolute pleasure to be the one to entertain you on this Friday afternoon. It is 2:00, which means for those in Cape Town, it's just one more hour, and then you're off and you can go to the beach, although the weather isn't great for the beach now, but I always see people on the beach, even in this weather. So, hopefully maybe we'll see each other there. Who knows? And to everyone that is in the north, you still have about 3 hours before you can go, because there is a go-getter attitude in the north that here in Cape Town gets interfered with the beach. So have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope that everything that you plan to do absolutely works out in your favor. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and God willing, I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.